I want to bring in my panel of MSNBC analysts, Robert Costa, a national political reporter for The Washington Post, Elise Jordan, a Time columnist and former advisor to Senator Rand Paul, and Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com and professor at Morgan State University. Bob, I want to start with you. Your reaction to the way President Trump has handled both of these situations. I can't say it's a surprise, but he's putting himself in some dangerous territory.
President Trump has chosen to respond to the controversy around Senator Franken, not to judge more. That's telling that he does want to wade into this national debate about sexual assault and sexual harassment. At the same time, when it comes to the Alabama race, there are political sensitivities down there. This is a state that's the beating heart of his base, and he is reluctant, after being burned in a sense during that primary runoff, to wade in once again and maybe try to push Roy Moore out of this race.
But then why weigh in on Al Franken? Elise, think about this. The position President Trump is putting himself in, remember, there are over 10 women who've accused President Trump. He, while on the campaign trail, denied it, called them liars, said he was going to sue them. I can't find any record that he has moved forward on such lawsuits. Why would President Trump weigh in on Al Franken, hold off on Roy Moore, knowing what could be coming down the pipe for him?
Donald Trump has never had to face any repercussions for his actions, and so he believes that he is innocent. He believes that he is above reproach. You look at the pattern of Donald Trump and how he dealt with his accusers by defaming them, by saying that they were too unattractive for him to ever have molested or harassed. It's the same as Roy Moore saying that he is going to sue his accusers for defamation, and neither one of them are ever moving on that.
Right. Okay, well, a very different approach is Al Franken. Al Franken is inviting an ethics investigation. What's your take on this? Does that actually help him? Because this isn't a good situation for Al.
No. Look, it doesn't bring back the integrity or the hurt or change the hurt for the woman that he grabbed and attempted to harass one way or another. But it is somebody taking some responsibility. Look, Stephanie, at the core, I think these are voter issues, and they're also legal issues. If no one wants to sue Al Franken for his lousy behavior, even if they discover other people did it, then okay, fine. I guess he escapes legal consequences. But it's up to the voters to decide. And that's why it's different from Roy Moore. They have an opportunity to keep someone who's done this kind of behavior from getting into office. That's where the big difference is. Trump doesn't care about that.
How is that a big difference? They're both voter issues.
They're both voter issues, but Franken's already in office. So you have to have someone else run against him if you want to vote him out because you don't like his behavior, which is different than Roy Moore, who's not in office yet. If you don't want this guy to go in, who's never taken any responsibility for anything, voters in Alabama can make that decision.
Politically, it would have been such an easy point for the Democrats to score if they really wanted to establish the playing field and that they are going to be tough on sexual harassment and assault.
You mean Republicans?
No, Democrats. If they had forced Al Franken out, then it would have been harder for the Republicans to maneuver around all of these issues.
See, but you've got so many people. You have so many people in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party who have engaged in this kind of behavior.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's why it's not happening.
Yeah. I don't think. I mean, you've got Christine Gillibrand saying, "Hey, Bill Clinton probably should have stepped down a couple years ago for what he did." There's a lot of people who've engaged in this kind of behavior.
Let's actually share that sound right now.
Is it your view that the President Clinton should have stepped down at that time, given the allegations?
Yes, I think that is the appropriate response.
All right, Bob Costa, how difficult is a statement like this for Kirsten Gillibrand? She's already gotten pushback from former Clinton staffers who have said, you're biting the hand that fed you, you took Hillary Clinton's seat. But at the end of the day, that's neither here nor there. This is a different time, and she's coming out and saying that's wrong. What kind of heat is she going to take for that?
You nailed it, Stephanie. This whole episode is revealing of our changing times. And Senator Gillibrand is a longtime supporter of the Clinton family, both former President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton, coming out of upstate New York. She needed their support in some respects as she was ascending the political ladder, and she counted on them at crucial moments in her career. But the times have changed, and she is at the forefront now of this discussion we're having. She's leading some of the fights on Capitol Hill. And so this shows the political dilemma both Democrats and Republicans face as these issues swirl.
Can I ask you about the political dilemma for young people in the South? Elise, I have watched you over the last week distressed and distraught over the Roy Moore situation. You're from Mississippi. So for young Republicans from Alabama, for Mississippi, what does all this do to your brand?
I think it's so unfortunate that a degenerate like Roy Moore is doing such harm to the reputation of the South, because no one in the Deep South thinks it is okay to molest children. And I honestly think that that will be reflected at the polls.
Okay, just real
with
quick.
The election.
Real quick. We cannot say that no one in the Deep South thinks that.
I know,
because,
but I'm saying overall, I mean, look at, there are some vocal Roy Moore supporters right now. But I think that they are a small minority, and you look at
You're right.
people,
It's a small minority, but it's not no one. It's not no one.
You have a guy saying that's how we got Jesus.
You look at who are his main supporters right now. Roy Moore, literally coming from out of state activists are trying to force their worldview on Alabama residents. That I think is just, it's unfair to the majority of people in the state.
Well, we are going to hear from Roy Moore supporters, women, today. I spoke to a Roy Moore friend for 40 years who said, I've known this guy for 40 years. I've never seen him do anything like it. There is I mean...
See, there's two things about this. Number one, and I know this is problematic to say, but this is the same thing I thought about like with dogfighting and Michael Vick, right? There are people who I knew in grad school in North Carolina and Georgia who are like, oh, we do dogfighting, we do cockfighting all the time. There's people who think that's normal. It may be strange to us in this room, regardless of where we're from, but there are people in Alabama and other places across the country who think, hey, you know, they were, as long as they were both straight, blah, blah, blah. There are people who don't have issues with that. And a larger problem is this. I mean, I obviously do. Everybody here has a problem with it. A larger problem is this. It's never a good sign.
Do you know who else has a problem with it?
The law. Yeah, exactly.
The law.
And it's wrong.
Since 1900.
Yeah, since 1900
in Alabama.
But you have this situation right now where you got a guy who's like, I'm going to bring out a bunch of women to support me. That never makes any sense. It's like, oh, I'm going to bring out gay people or Jewish people or Muslim people or black people to prove whatever sort of beliefs I don't have. Look, at the end of the day, you broke the law. We have evidence. You know, this looks like the cast of Dazed and Confused. You've been doing this consistently for years, and I hope that the majority of people in Alabama say this isn't a good idea, even though some of them think it's okay, and that's how things work.
We have another month of this. The accusations are really going to sink in. And you look at how Roy Moore is a deer in headlights. He cannot speak. He does not trust himself to be able to speak in a credible manner about these allegations after his damning interview.
He very clearly could have said, no. Robert Costa, I need you to weigh in on this, because when the Roy Moore situation started, from the get-go, there were claims that this is politically motivated, Let's turn to Al Franken, and I want to talk about this timing, because guess who's back? Roger Stone. How is it that Roger Stone knew that the Franken news was coming? Here's a quote. Let's just say Senator Franken's time in the barrel is about to come. This is what he told the Daily Caller over text early Thursday morning. That's hours before Leanne Tweeden came out with her claims. Bob, you're a Washington insider. What do you make of this?
Well, I have no reported on Stone directly. He's known to traffic in kind of the stories that are about to appear in different news organizations, so he has sources around the political community. So it's not entirely surprising he knew about this. But I think when you look at the reporting and the timing for a lot of this, Stephanie, we look at the Washington Post, the way it laid out its story. These women did not come to the Post. The Post found them during the course of the reporting. And in this sensitive time, the Post and other news organizations are doing more to show their reporting, so people, when they do raise questions about the timing of these stories, they can learn more about the process.
Last point on this.
This is not going to go away, and it's going to be nasty until the finish line mid-December.
Oh, goodness gracious. All right, we're going to leave it there. Bob, thank you for joining me this morning. And you got to see Bob today. What time, Bob?
8 o'clock, PBS Washington Week. We have a great show.
Who's going to be on?
We'll get one of our friends, Jeremy Peters, Nancy Cordes, Ed O'Keefe. We'll have a roundtable discussion of reporters.
You just got yourself a good Friday night.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
The United States Senate is grappling with two separate cases involving allegations of sexual misconduct. One is against a candidate to be senator. The other is against a sitting senator. One a Republican, the other a Democrat. One is denying all accusations while the other has issued an apology. It's been 1 week since the Washington Post's first report on the allegations of sexual misconduct against Alabama Republican Roy Moore, including one case involving a woman who says she was 14 years old and Roy Moore was in his 30s at the time of the encounter. Since then, a total of 9 women have come forward, seen here, but Roy Moore denies all of the allegations and claims that Mitch McConnell is behind the attack.
As you know, the Washington Post has brought some scurrilous, false charges, not charges, allegations, which I have emphatically denied time and time again. They're not only untrue, but they have no evidence to support them. Many of you have recognized that this is an effort by Mitch McConnell and his cronies to steal this election from the people of Alabama, and they will not stand for it. Well, I want to tell you who needs to step down. That's Mitch McConnell. There's been comments about me taking a stand. Yes, I have taken a stand in the past. I'll take a stand in the future, and I'll quit standing when they lay me in that box and put me in the ground.
Okay, so in other words, he will never back down, and the Alabama Republican Party doesn't think he needs to. Its steering committee met last night and decided to continue supporting Roy Moore as its nominee. And Alabama Governor Kay Ivey, also a Republican, reaffirmed today that the special election will remain on December 12th. Now, despite all of this, Roy Moore's accusers aren't backing down either. Tina Johnson first told her story to a major Alabama publication, AL.com, explaining that she was 28 years old when she went to Roy Moore's law office to sign over custody of her 12-year-old son to her mother. This was in 1991, when Roy Moore had already been married 6 years. Today, in an exclusive interview with NBC News, Tina Johnson explained for the first time on camera what she says happened once she got up to leave Roy Moore's office.
And then we eventually got up to leave. And as we did, my mother went first. And then when I got up and went out, he grabbed my behind. Just hard. I was in shock. And I was so humiliated and sickening. I didn't do anything. And that's what I regret. I just got out of there. Speed up a little bit and got out the door quick as I could.
Okay, story number one. Story number two, radio host Leanne Tweeden also told her story today, but hers involved Minnesota Democratic Senator Al Franken. Tweeden says both she and Franken went on a USO tour of the Middle East in 2006. This was after Franken was on Saturday Night Live and before he was in the Senate. She alleges that Franken forcibly kissed her and took a picture in which he groped her, seen here, while she was sleeping. Tweeden says the kiss happened as they were practicing a skit that they performed for the service members during the tour.
We did the line, and he came at me, and before you even know it, I mean, you kind of get close, and he just put his hand on the back of my head, and he mashed his face against, I mean, it happened so fast, and he just mashed his lips against my face, and he stuck his tongue in my mouth so fast. And all I can remember is that his lips were really wet, and it was slimy, and I remember I pushed him off with my hands, and I just remember I almost punched him, because every time I see him now, like, my hands clench into fists, and I'm sure that's probably why. And I said, if you ever do that to me again, I'm not going to be so nice about it the second time. And I just walked out away from him, and I walked out, and I just wanted to find a bathroom, and I just wanted to rinse my mouth out.
Senator Al Franken issued a lengthy statement that began, quote, "The first thing I want to do is apologize to Leanne, to everyone else who was part of that tour, to everyone who has worked for me, to everyone I represent, and to everyone who counts on me to be an ally and a supporter and a champion of women. There's more I want to say, but the first and most important thing, and if it's the only thing you care to hear, that's fine, is I'm sorry." He goes on to say, "Coming from the world of comedy, I've told and written a lot of jokes that I once thought were funny, but later came to realize were just plain offensive. But the intentions behind my actions aren't the point at all. It's the impact these jokes had on others that matter, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to come to terms with that." Senators on both sides of the aisle are calling for an ethics investigation, including Al Franken, who writes, "I'm asking that an ethics investigation be undertaken, and I will gladly cooperate." Leanne Tweeden says she accepts Al Franken's apology.
The apology, sure, I accept it, yes. I mean, people make mistakes, and of course he knew he made a mistake. So yes, I do accept that apology.
Tweeden also explained how she was inspired to come forward after hearing Congresswoman Jackie Spear's story about being assaulted.
I think that was my catalyst to sort of go, you know, if I'm going to tell my story, now is the time. 2017 is not 2006. You know, it's just a different time. And maybe I can be somebody's Jackie Spear and they can tell their story in real time and not wait.
All right, joining us now, Donna Edwards, a former Democratic Congresswoman from Maryland and currently senior fellow at the Brennan Center for Justice. Joyce Vance, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama and a professor at the University of Alabama Law School. And Charlie Sykes, author of the book How the Right Lost Its Mind and an MSNBC contributor. Thank you all for being with us tonight. We're getting a lot of reaction to all of this. But, Donna, there's almost a bigger thing going on now. Rachel was talking about it, and that is certainly in the halls of power, in the halls of commerce, and in the halls of government. We are hearing more and more of these things. In the case of Tweeden, she was inspired by Jackie Spear coming forward. New York Senator Kristen Gillibrand said tonight about Bill Clinton that she feels that Mr. Clinton should have stepped down at the time of the accusation. Asked directly if she believed Mr. Clinton should have stepped down at the time, Ms. Gillibrand took a long pause and said, yes, I think that is the appropriate response. Donna, tell me about this, because you spent time in Congress where it now looks like sexual harassment or things of this nature are rampant.
Well, let me just say, I mean, both as a member of Congress, as a worker in the private sector, I think that there are a few women, and myself included, who haven't experienced some form of harassing behavior, assault, as we've seen described by these stories in these last several weeks, or just inappropriate and offensive behavior. And I think that we are at a time in 2017, it was always unacceptable, but now it is really unacceptable. And I think that women are stepping forward and telling their stories because they can. And, my view is that we actually need more women in positions of power so that we can set the rules and we can change the culture, and that includes in the United States Congress.
That's the good news. The bad news, of course, is that we keep on hearing about these new allegations day after day. Charlie, in the few minutes that we've been on air, the president has finally tweeted about sexual harassment. But it is not about Roy Moore, on whom he won't comment. This is about Al Franken. He says, the Al Frankenstein picture is really bad, speaks 1,000 words. Where do his hands go in pictures 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6? While she sleeps. Charlie, the president did not address this when he spoke to the nation yesterday, when he spoke to pool reporters. Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked about it several times today, and she said, let me just play a little bit about one of the interchanges today from the press conference.
As we all know, the president faced a number of similar allegations, or somewhat similar allegations, during the course of the campaign, and he vigorously denied them. But I wonder what you would assert to be the difference between the two situations, such that on the face of things, we should find one set of allegations very troubling, and on the other, we shouldn't pay attention to them at all, or we should totally disbelieve them.
Well, I think the president has certainly a lot more insight into what he personally did or didn't do, and he spoke out about that directly during the campaign, and I don't have anything further to add beyond that.
So, Charlie, there seem to be at least two Republicans who are out of step with even mainstream Republican views on this, and that is Roy Moore and President Donald Trump.
Yeah, just when you think that he has plumbed the depths of hypocrisy, he goes even further. I'm tempted to say, does Donald Trump have no shame? But I think we know the answer to that. Look, one of the reasons why I think he'd stayed silent is he understood two things. Number one, that the rules have changed. We are in the midst of a cultural sea change when it comes to the issue of sexual abuse. 2017 is not 2016. You have more than a dozen women who have come forward credibly making allegations about him. He is apparently not willing to cut his ties from the serial abuser down in Alabama. And at some point, obviously, look, people are going to say, if we believe all of these other women, which we ought to do, why did we not believe the women that came forward and made the allegations against the man who is the president of the United States? So at the end of this, you can see very, very clearly that issue is going to become very live once again. But somehow we need to break away from this tribalist, double standard hypocrisy, this cycle where we defend the guys on our side and we attack the guys on the other side, because that's how we get Donald Trump in the White House and that's how you get Roy Moore in the Senate.
So it's interesting. With respect to Al Franken, we expect that the Senate Ethics Committee will take this up, Joyce. That's what Al Franken has asked for. That's what it seems every senator has asked for. We don't know. The Senate Ethics Committee doesn't have the best history of taking up matters of irresponsibility or bad behavior that senators undertake, but we'll see if that happens. But he did issue an apology in which he apologized to Leanne Tweeden. That stands in some contrast, Joyce, to the press conference that Roy Moore joined this afternoon with a number of religious leaders who are still supporting him, in which, to Charlie's point, he did not name any of the accusers. He did not say their names. He has not at any point issued an apology, even for a misunderstanding. He has attacked the media, he has attacked the Republican establishment, and he has attacked Democrats for doing this. His approach is very different.
Roy Moore seems to have taken a page from President Trump's book. This looks very much like the way the president responded to accusations both before and during the campaign. It worked well for President Trump. He got elected despite those allegations from a number of women, including underage women involved in pageants. He somehow or another got past the Access Hollywood tape, in which he acknowledged engaging in conduct that is a few degrees further along than even what Al Franken has acknowledged today he engaged in. So perhaps Roy Moore believes that he, like President Trump, can survive these allegations, be elected, and go on to serve.
Donna, a lot of women who have come forward in various, countless stories that they've recounted for us in the last 2 months or so have had to offer excuses or reasons as to why they didn't come forward in earlier days. And there is a sameness about them. Leanne Tweeden explains why she didn't come out sooner. Let's listen together.
I mean, look, I was afraid to speak out 11 years ago. I wanted to say something, and there were people around me who said, oh my God, you will get annihilated and you will never work in this town again. And I was afraid of that. I really was afraid of that.
Donna, that's some version of the story everybody has. I was afraid of it in my company. I was afraid it wouldn't be taken seriously. The other day, I looked at the rules that Congress has for reporting a complaint. They are Byzantine. And generally speaking, these things tend to be stacked against a woman who comes forward with a complaint about a more powerful man.
Well, and their fear is, is appropriate as evidenced by the attack that has taken place against Roy Moore's accusers, against Donald Trump's accusers. This is what women experience, and I think that we are in a different kind of environment, but not so different. I mean, I worry, frankly, about the ethics process. I served on the House Ethics Committee. I know that it can be a long, drawn-out process. It's in secret. The deck is, in some ways stacked against the victims and the accusers. And so I think that we really have to deal with this. And how offensive for the President of the United States to send out a tweet about Al Franken, given that he's the man who was on tape grabbing at women. I mean, it is so deeply offensive. He's the one who needs to resign.
Let me ask you about this, Charlie. Al Franken, he released an initial short, not that satisfactory statement, and then he released a longer one in which this stood out to me. He said, over the last few months, all of us, including and especially men who respect women, have been forced to take a good, hard look at our own actions and think, perhaps shamefully for the first time, about how those actions have affected women. Charlie, I wonder if there are a lot of men tonight who are reading those words, not wishing to come out and say that they've done anything that would have offended, troubled, affected women, but for whom those words ring very true.
Yeah, I think there are, I mean, including men who haven't done it, who are, now realizing that, many of the things that you heard that women were complaining about or talking to one another about, the things were much worse than any of us had any idea. That in fact, many of us, ignored or missed a lot of the things that were happening. But I do have to say this about the moment we're in right now, and it's very hard to predict where we're going. I would just say that the stronger the Democrats are in policing their own bad actors and making it very clear, drawing the lines about Bill Clinton and going back, the stronger their case will be if Roy Moore comes to the Senate. The stronger their moral status will be. This is not whataboutism. It's about coming up with some sort of non-tribal, consistent standard. And it starts with Al Franken, who, by the way, I'm not saying he has moral equivalence between him and Roy Moore because they're very, very different, but somehow, look, the dam is about to break in Washington. There's about to be a tsunami of these allegations in Capitol Hill, and people better decide whether they're going to look at it in a partisan term, in a tribal term, or whether or not we're actually going to believe the women.
Joyce, let me show you. We've got a new poll out with the Alabama special election. These are a little bit tough because turnout in these special elections, one never knows what they're going to be. But Doug Jones, the Democrat, has pulled 8 points ahead of Roy Moore. Roy Moore is sticking to the idea that not only are these women and the media lying about him, but you heard him say in our opening, the sound that we played earlier, he said there's no evidence to support them. That's legally key for him. These are accounts that are coming out 30-plus years later, likely not to face any court cases. What does he have when he says that?
I think that what he's trying to do is position his situation in a way that forces voters to reject the claims that these women have made against him. He's saying you have to find evidence that I'm guilty beyond a reasonable doubt if you're going to reject me as a Senate candidate. And that's just not true. That's not what's happening here. We're not in a court of law. He's not being judged by the reasonable doubt standard. Instead, the question here is whether Alabama voters are comfortable with this man, comfortable with his character in light of these allegations that have come out, in light of his prior two-time removal as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, in light of allegations that he and his wife were taking money from their personal charity and not disclosing those funds. And do all of these character flaws start to add up and lead Alabama voters to believe that this isn't somebody that they want to hire as their senator? So it's clever of Moore to try to position this as proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But, Allie, there's not going to be a trial between now and this election.
Absolutely not. 27 days.
And that, I think, that's just a non-starter.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Thank you for that, Joyce. Donna Edwards and Charlie Sykes, thank you for joining us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.
1 year after helping him to elect him to the presidency, voters from the key battleground state of North Carolina are expressing some frustration with Donald Trump. A 12-person focus group run by veteran pollster Peter Hart on behalf of Emory University delivered harsh reviews for the president's conduct since taking office. Among the group, 5 voted for Trump. Here's what 2 of them had to say.
I thought his ideas appealed to me. Since he's been in there, he's embarrassed me by his behavior.
How?
He behaves unpresidential. I can't imagine how they let him build a country club, let alone be in one, because we don't behave that way.
He doesn't facilitate working together. He comes out with these grandiose ideas and there's no follow through.
Despite the voters' tough critiques of Trump's behavior and his lack of accomplishment, they say, none of the 5 Trump voters would rule out supporting him again.
I'm still optimistic. He still has a lot of time to prove something. It's still better than having a career politician in there. He has had a harder road because everybody hates him, not just the Democrats and not just the Republicans.
But you've been pretty tough on him, too.
Yeah, I mean, I expect a lot out of him.
And joining us now, a member of the House Committee on Financial Services, Democratic Congressman John Delaney of Maryland. He is already running for his party's presidential nomination. Congressman, good to have you.
Welcome.
Great to be here.
I'm going to forgive you for having gone to Bergen Catholic High School, which is my rival high school. Let's not get into
We'll see
football.
if I get through the whole show without that coming.
I want to talk about the tax bill that passed yesterday in just a second, but I think people will hear he's already in the presidential race. You actually got in this summer, in early August. Yeah. What is your message, or what should be the national message of Democrats, one that didn't work for Hillary Clinton running last year against Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, I think we should be the party that wants to return civility to politics, wants to return some notion of respect to the profession of public service, and actually wants to bring the party that brings the country together and starts focusing on some of the things we agree on, as opposed to always talking about the things we don't agree on, which is what's basically happened in politics.
Like what? What's an example of that?
Well, infrastructure. There's a great example. The country broadly agrees we need much more investment in infrastructure by any measure. It'll create jobs. It'll make our businesses more competitive. It'll improve the lives of our citizens. So, you know, that's what we should be focused on. And but we're not doing that. We're talking about these very divisive issues, and we continue to do that. And so that's an example of something we should be doing.
And what about the divisive issues? Are you talking about like social issues? You don't think you should go so hard left on those, or at least not talk about them and put them out front?
I think one of the problems with the Democratic Party is we are sometimes 1,000 flowers blooming. We have a lot of issues we care about, but at the end of the day, what the American people most care about is their job, their pay, and opportunity for their children.
So let's talk about this tax bill. You voted against it, of course. We just heard your colleague, Congressman Ryan, ripping it to shreds. What do you object to in the bill?
So I think, obviously, the bill disproportionately benefits wealthy Americans. It does a lot of things to hurt middle-class Americans. But I think the thing that I object to the most in the bill is it's fundamentally not solving the principal problem we have in this country right now. The principal problem we have in this country right now is we're not investing in infrastructure and in human capital. They're using a strategy that was deployed 40 years ago by Ronald Reagan and Bill Bradley. And his strategy, their strategy back then, was to try to get more private capital invested in the economy. Right now, we have no shortage of private capital invested in this economy. What we have a shortage of is public capital. Right? Our infrastructure investment as a percentage of our economy has been cut in half. We haven't invested in human capital. There's 7 million jobs in this country that are unfilled because companies can't find workers with the skills. So we should be doing tax reform that addresses those problems.
You have a background in business. Isn't lowering the corporate tax rate a good idea for companies that then hire more people, and that's a way to grow the economy?
It is, but it should be done. Right now, the corporate tax rate on average, right, that we pay in this country is very consistent with our competitors, right? So we talk about 35%, but in fact, on average, they pay in the low 20s. So the way to get the corporate tax rate down is actually to eliminate deductions, right, not to just cut the rate. Clearly, it would be better to have the corporate tax rate lower. But if you go to CEOs who are running major companies and you ask them what's the central issue they're facing right now, it's really not the tax code. It's a shortage of workers. It's the skills gap. It's the fact that the country hasn't invested in infrastructure. It's the fact that the public schools aren't producing kids that have the skills they need. These are the central issues. And what we should be doing as part of tax reform is not trying to solve a problem that existed 40 years ago, when in fact the marginal tax rates were really high and there were a lot of tax shelters. So what people were doing was investing in non-economic investments, and capital wasn't flowing efficiently. What we should be doing is using our tax code to encourage the kind of behavior we actually need to grow our economy, which is more infrastructure, more human capital. That's what you need to compete in a world that's rapidly changing based on technological innovation, automation, and globalization.
So I'm curious, especially since you're running for president, watching that focus group, was that those Trump voters who seemed, I mean, really broken, just totally depressed and disappointed, and yet they still might support him again. What does that say about the Democratic Party and about who even potentially could be an inspirational figure?
Well, it says that we're not speaking to the American people about what they care about. I think what the American people are dying for is someone to actually try to bring us together, to actually bring competence to government, to actually focus on some of the things we agree on, and to really be almost with a singular focus on the things that moves most Americans, which is their job, their pay, and opportunity for their children. Every time we're not talking about that as a
It's not happening right now, is it? I mean, did you see? I mean, I couldn't believe what I watched there. It was the saddest thing I think I've ever seen.
Well, but it's moving, right? They were sold the con,
right? You know, that's, and you can see it, kind of the realization
But there's
coming.
nowhere to go.
But there was also what you heard is that they were upset with the behavior more than anything else. They're still hopeful for some new ideas. And what I would ask you is, as running for president, we talk about a divisive country, but what about the party itself? How do you bring the Democratic Party behind you from the different factions it has?
Well, I think the voters often decide this, right? And I think the voters are in different places than where party leadership is. So some of the things I'm talking about when running for president is the first 100 days only doing things on a bipartisan basis, having the president go to the Congress once a quarter and debate the Congress, just like the Prime Minister does in Great Britain, for 3 hours primetime television, to get to the truth.
Yeah.
Talking about the country as if half the people are not entirely wrong about everything they believe. Right? That's the kind of leadership that I think the country's looking for. And that's the kind of leadership that I think a president should be providing. And that's the kind of leadership that I think could get the Democratic Party back in a position where we're really winning elections. Look at Virginia. Look at Virginia. Ralph Northam ran a campaign based on civility and competence, which is true to who he is, was authentic to the kind of human being he is, and the voters embraced it. This is a huge opportunity for the Democratic Party to actually conduct themselves in a way that the American people are looking for. And it's the right answer as a matter of substance.
Congressman John Delaney, thank you very much for being on the show this morning.
Thank you.
Still ahead, we continue our conversation on sexual harassment in the wake of allegations against a growing list of prominent men, of which Senator Al Franken is now the latest. Plus, the Senate Judiciary Committee is once again trying to get Russia-related documents from Jared Kushner. We'll tell you what materials senators say are missing. Morning Joe is coming right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.